Should overloads be added to old school RuneScape? That is the question, and we will discuss this today, right now, in this video. Thanks for clicking on it. Appreciate you. Overloads are one of the potions of all time. It's true. Everything that has ever existed in the universe, the galaxy, the Milky Way, whatever you want to call it, anything that has ever existed has either been an overload or not an overload. Think about it for a second. Before we can discuss if an overload potion should be added to the main game of old school, we gotta know, what do they do? What are they? For those of you who don't actually know, they were originally added back in RuneScape on October 7th, 2009. I remember the day very vividly. That was the day that I finally hit puberty. No, I don't actually remember what day I hit puberty, but the overloads were definitely added on October 7th, 2009. I looked it up on the wiki. So overloads boost your stats up to level 118, and it holds them there for 5 minutes. If your stats get lowered at any point during this 5-minute period, then every 15 seconds it gets reboosted. So if you are 118 stats, and then you sip a Ceradon brew and your stats go down to level 80, level 90, whatever it is, it'll get boosted back up to the 118 after 15 seconds. Basically, they're very helpful, and they're very good for PVMing. Before we get any further in this video, I wanted to have a quick message from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by COG, also known as the Cows of Gwyneth. That's right, these cows have been sitting here, and nobody has come to visit them in the longest time. They're very tired and bored. Yeah, thanks for sponsoring the video. First thing to get out of the way in this video here is that I strongly believe that if overloads were to be added to old school RuneScape, they won't boost your stats any higher than the current best in slot boosts. So 118 attack, strength, defense, 112 range, and for magic, it's a little trickier. The current best boost that you can get for magic is through using a saturated heart. A saturated heart is an imbued heart that has been combined with 150,000 ancient essence. You can get the imbued heart from Superior Slayer monsters at a very rare sort of rate. So they're not easy to get, especially as an Iron Man, unless you get lucky. So there's a couple of options for how we could sort of approach what the magic boost on an overload would be. I know in the previous iterations, it also boosts your stats up to the same level. So you'd have 118 attack, strength, defense, range, and magic, or 125 in each of those stats. Like that would break the game. It would make the saturated heart completely useless, and that is definitely not where the old school team should go with this. The options would be they could boost it up to 112 and the heart becomes useless. I think that's not fair. I don't think it's healthy. They're very careful with what they add and how they add it. Next option would be you could boost up to level 109. This is the level that you can achieve with a Forgotten Brew. A Forgotten Brew is sort of a weird item that has recently been added. It wouldn't work with an overload, I don't think, because a Forgotten Brew actually lowers your melee stats while boosting your prayer. I think the third option is the best option, where it would just boost you to level 103 magic, like a traditional magic potion. It's underwhelming, but you could pair the overload with a saturated heart or a Forgotten Brew, just as you do right now in the game. I mean, you would bring an overload and you would bring a saturated heart everywhere you go, if you wanted to boost all of the stats up. Fourth option, kind of a weird one, just don't boost magic at all. Again, not a traditional overload. Traditional overload kind of boosts everything, so that one's kind of interesting. Don't think it's worth it. And fifth option would be to combine a saturated heart with the overload somehow. Maybe each time you make an overload, you could use a saturated heart on the overload and it becomes an overload S or saturated. I think that's a crappy option. My favorite option is still option 3, where you just have a magic potion boost and it brings you to 103. So it's still a nice little bonus, but you still want to bring a saturated heart or a Forgotten Brew if you don't have an imbued heart yet. Iron Man, it sucks, I know. They're hard to get. So how to make an overload in old school. First off, level 99 Herblore. This is the best potion you could possibly make, so that it would take the highest level. At level 99, you can make an overload. I think it should also be locked behind a new Master or Grandmaster quest, a high-level quest, new area in the game, tie it all together, and the big reward is overloads. I think it would be a solid way of adding a ton of new content into the game. The potions that you would combine to make this would be a Divine Super Combat, a Divine Ranging Potion, a Divine Magic Potion, and a Menophyte Remedy. So a Menophyte Remedy is a stat renewal potion that restores 6 levels plus 16% of the player's combat stats every 15 seconds over the course of 5 minutes. This is a potion that not many people actually know about. It was added when Tombs of Amascut was added, so it's made by using a vial of water, a dwarf weed, and a Lily of the Sands, which is only obtainable from Tombs of Amascut at this present moment. So you would add all of these potions together, and on top of that, I think they should add a new tier of herb. Or herb, sorry, I'm going with herb for the rest of the video. So this new herb would be something that you can get after completing this Grandmaster quest or this Master quest. The area that is unlocked would have, let's say, some new monsters that can be killed. These would drop either the herbs themselves or some seeds that you can actually go ahead and plant and harvest yourself. The new monster could be locked behind an 86 level Slayer requirement. I don't know if maybe 86 is the right number. Maybe it's 97. Currently there's nothing above 95. If they wanted to, they could make these very hard to get to. Or they could just put them in at 86. Perhaps they don't have any Slayer requirement at all. I don't think that part is too important. But I would expect that these monsters drop a few seeds per hour, maybe 10 to 15 herbs per hour. Like not many at all, but this would kind of keep the, of how good an overload actually would be. It makes them hard to get, and also, given that they would be tradable, which is what I would recommend, they would keep their price quite high. It's a risk-reward factor. Is it worth spending a bunch of money to use an overload, or is it worth investing a bunch of time to use an overload, or is it just easier to just use the Divine Super Combat? I think another really cool way of getting the seed to actually plant these herbs would be a new expanded farming contract. So they could add this directly to the farming guild where it is currently, or maybe they add a new area that has a new sort of farming contract master, of some sort, where they could assign farming contracts that are global across the entire game. So you could be assigned anything from plant a palm tree in Catherby, or I guess harvest a palm tree, or maybe harvest some watermelons in Mauritania. Shout out to Swampman good. Something like that. So it could be anywhere in the game, and when you get back and complete your contract, you get a seed pack, and you spam at that until you open all the seeds, and you can see what you get. Maybe you get the new seed, maybe you don't. Could be a rare drop from that. So that's just sort of another way that you could get the seed. With all these potion components and the time to get them, the requirements, and just how good they are, these will be pricey. They'll definitely be worth upwards of 100k each. The potions alone are currently at 23k each. The new herb coming into the game could be anywhere 50k, 25k. It depends on what drop rate they put them at. Just for balancing purposes, they would definitely have to run some numbers and see what they want to add them in as. A Divine Bastion potion is currently almost 30k. It's crazy, but potions are, essential to anything you do, and an overload is just the pinnacle of using potions for anything PVM and potentially PvP. We'll visit that a little further into the video. So if these potions are over 100k each, why would someone spend that much money just to get them? The biggest reason why overloads are so good is just sheer quality of life for anybody using them. I mean, immediately you're saving on inventory space. You're not lugging around a super combat, a range pot, a magic pot, for example. You're saving on restores. You don't need to restore your stats when you technically didn't even need the prayer bonus from the restores. If you are at Nex, for example, you're going to be chugging brews the whole time, especially in small teams. You chug 3 brew sips, you drink 1 restore, and then you repot your range up to level 112. Immediately, by the time you've done this, Nex has lowered your HP down again, so you have to re-brew, re-restore, and then re-pod range again. So it's just a constant battle there. If you had an overload, you could sip one sip of a brew and maybe wait 15 seconds and your stats will go back up. You can actually time when you sip the brews to boost your stats up. This is the most efficient way of using an overload. You can essentially stay potted the whole time if you're only sipping one brew sip every 15 seconds. It's just nice to have an all-in-one potion, for sure. I mean, whenever you go to do any PVMing, you'd bring an overload, you know, GP permitting, if you have enough coins, or if you're an Iron Man, you've invested the time to get it and have the levels and the requirements to make them. It's just, they'd be very beneficial, but seeing as they don't actually boost you any higher than the current highest level you can go, they are just really for quality of life. They wouldn't break any new world records per se. People have already set some pretty high records where they stay potted the whole time. This was just maybe make things a little easier on PVMers and all that stuff. Should these be allowed in the wilderness? It'd be tricky to kind of do that. You know, would you be able to drink an overload outside the wilderness and then step in and you still have the effects of the overload? Or maybe you can't drink them in the wilderness, or maybe they're just fully allowed. I think maybe you could just go ahead and fully allow them. I don't know how else they could really get around it. Maybe as soon as you step in, it removes an overload from you. It was handled back in RuneScape 2 some way, on not being able to use them in the wilderness, so perhaps they could revisit how that worked. I think one cool thing they could do if they were allowed in the wilderness is with this new Grandmaster quest and this new piece of content, perhaps they could add a new weapon with a special attack that just removes someone's overload effect while PKing. I think that'd be hilarious. And it would just completely devalue the point of using an overload. You just wouldn't have an overload anymore. You wouldn't be potted. So, yeah. Another sort of issue per se with adding overloads to the main game is, what do you do with the overloads that come from Nightmare Zone? What do you do with the overloads that come from Chambers of Xeric? So at first glance, I would say Nightmare Zone already is just a garbage piece of content. It's a great way of training your stats, but it's so strange that one of the best, if not the best way of training your stats is hidden away in an instance that you make money from. It just doesn't make sense. It's not balanced currently in the game. And they definitely should look at removing Nightmare Zone. I think this would be a perfect opportunity to do that. With the game update where the overloads would be added, at the same time they could revamp how Nightmare Zone works. It is cool to be able to fight old bosses from quests, but maybe not as the best way of training your stats. If they were to delete Nightmare Zone, first off, they would convert all of the overloads that people currently have purchased into Nightmare Zone points. They could leave the shop open either for some time or indefinitely. Dominic Onion, the guy at Nightmare Zone, could be turned into an NPC that just sells scrolls of redirection, or they could make it so people can craft scrolls of redirection with, you know, a magic level or a crafting level requirement. There's no other rewards there that can't be obtained elsewhere. You can imbue your Salve Amulet and your Slayer Helmet through Soul Wars, and they should definitely look at adding this to other pieces of content, other mini-games. Some mini-games could use some love. Imagine you could go and play 4 games of Castle Wars and then imbue your Salve Amulet with that. That's just enjoyable. Currently, you go in, you fight some bosses, and then you can imbue it. It's kind of strange, but that's the way it goes. Alright, the biggest problem of adding overloads to the main game of Old School would be, what do you rename the overload in Chambers of Xeric to be? That's easy. You definitely call it Old Juice. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you coming on this little conceptual discussion with me. I personally would be in favor of adding overloads to RuneScape if they were under, you know, the sort of rules and regulations that I just set out in this video. I think they fit. They don't break the game. They're not super great. They don't boost your stats past the 118 that you can only get to with current boosts. I think it would be great. I think they fit. You just give them all of these sort of requirements and all these different sort of how to make them and everything. I think they fit. What do you think? Slam a comment in the comment section below. Just slam it. Don't even type it. Throw it in there. And while you're at it, click on the link in the description to check out my Twitch channel. And definitely drop a follow there. I'll be streaming all kinds of stuff. If you want to have a live conversation with me about overloads or anything, just come to the Twitch channel when I'm live and start chatting in the chat. I'll see you there. Thank you very much for watching, everybody.